Բարև ձեզ, եթերում առաջինի փոդքասթն է, խոսում ենք ամենակարևոր հետաքրքիր թեմաներից, սոցիալական, մշակութային եւ այսօր ուզում եմ խոսել մի կարևոր թեմայի շուրջ։ Թերևս միակ պատճառը, որը ստիպում է ինձ սիրել օգոստոսի 31 ամռան վերջին օրը, դա այն փաստն է, որ այդ օրը ծնվել է իմ ամենասիրած գրողներից մեկը, Վիլյամ Սարոյանը։ Այս առիթով մեկնարկել է Սարոյանական օրեր նախաձեռնությունը, որը կազմակերպել է Հայաստանում ամենադեսպանատունը եւ Սարոյանի հիմնադրամի հետ համատեղ։ Սեպտեմբերի 5-ից մինչև սեպտեմբերի 11-ը Երևանը բառացիորեն լցվելու է Սարոյանի ոգով։ Կլինեն ընթերցումներ, Սարոյանի անտիպ պատմվածքների գրքի շնորհանդես, բեմադրություններ, նրա ստեղծագործություններից ներշնչված։ Ես որոշեցի, որ մեր հեռուստաեթեր եւս պետք է բերել սարոյանական շունչ եւ այսօր մեր զրուցակիցը Սարոյանի հիմնադրամի նախագահ Setrakianն է։ Իսկ մեզ կօգնի թարգմանել մեր լավ ընկեր ճգնախ Լուսիլ Ջանինյանը։ Բարև ձեզ,
So the only reason why I do like August 31st day, it is that is because it is William Saroyan's birthday, and this year Yerevan started to be filled with the spirit of our phenomenal writer William Saroyan, with its performances like Saroyan Days brought a lot of Saroyan spirit to our country these days, and we couldn't skip it, so we have decided to bring it to our TV as well, and so we have decided to invite the president of William Saroyan Foundation to our TV. And first of all, thanks for being our guest, because we know how busy your schedule may be. And let me start with this. Mostly and most frequently, I think that for talented people, the space, God is sending so-called guardian angels. What is they doing? Maybe in the form of a wife or of a lover or of a mother, someone who invisibly supports the talents. I think for Saroyan case, your father was one of them. So what would you tell us? Was he just a friend who was collecting his legacy, or exactly he was this guardian angel?
First of all, thank you very much for having me, Gohar. It's great to be here in Yerevan. This is the second time I've been here over William Saroyan's birthday, and I've always been really energized by the enthusiasm and love that the Armenian people have for William Saroyan. Saroyan was born in Fresno. My father was born in Fresno. They were both born, of course, to Armenian immigrants, both who came from Bitlis. My grandfather and Saroyan's father and mother were from Bitlis. When Saroyan was a young boy selling newspapers in Fresno, my grandfather was kind of a big shot. He was a vintner. He was very big guy in the raisin industry, was very well known and very well liked. And Saroyan looked up to my grandfather, who was older than he was. My father was younger than Saroyan, but in the early 1970s, Saroyan wrote a letter to my dad. He had seen an article in a magazine about him, and they became, we call it pen pals. They wrote to one another for many years, and of course got to know each other. It is a bit emotional for me to say that my father was, in a way, a guardian angel to Saroyan, and Saroyan was, in a way, a guardian angel to my dad. They were very close in a very important way. One of the best things that ever happened in my life, when I was in my early 20s, I was invited to stay with my younger brother for 2 weeks at 74 Rue Tate-Bou, Saroyan's flat in Paris. And it was a wonderful adventure. Mr. Saroyan was not there. We had the whole place to ourselves, but it was great. When Saroyan died, much to my father's surprise, complete surprise, he made my father both the executor to his estate and also the first president of the William Saroyan Foundation. And I think that Saroyan thought that my father would be able to basically execute against two dimensions of Saroyan's legacy. The first was the administrative work of gathering all of his literary and artistic effects, which were in Paris, Fresno, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, and gather them together, and one way or another make them suitable for research, and also to be able to promote his legacy into the future so that people would remember Saroyan as he was. Just one story that is a good example. My father, as per Saroyan's wishes, arranged to have half of his ashes buried at the Ararat Cemetery in Fresno and half of his ashes buried here in Yerevan at the Komitas Pantheon.
Շատերը Սարոյանի գրականության ստեղծագործության միջոցով են ճանաչում։
Most of people come to Armenia, even foreigners, because they want to find out Saroyan spirit from the Armenian point of view. And as you have mentioned, it's your second visit to Armenia. How much it resembles to the real Armenian spirit Saroyan had? Is it the same that you imagine, and that people come and like enhance your?
Այստեղի ապրող հայերի մեր այսօրվա առօրյայի հետ։
It's my third visit, actually. And my first visit was last year, and one of the most moving experiences I had was on Saroyan's birthday, when I visited his statue here in Yerevan, and there were maybe 80 school children laying at his feet, the feet of the statue, lilies in honor of his birthday. And I really thought that the spirit of Saroyan, that was totally in Saroyan's spirit, and B, that really the spirit of Saroyan is most expressed here in Armenia.
Նշեցիք, որ
You have mentioned that they were in close relationship with your father, so he was a guardian angel. And sometimes when speaking about famous people, we create a hero that sometimes is not the same as they do in their real life. So according to what your father was telling you, were they the same, do we have the same Saroyan in real life, or we have created or no? Can you just recall some memories or something like that?
I want to tell you more about my direct experience of the last year. Tomorrow, we will be releasing with Antares Publishing a book of 22 Saroyan short stories that have never been published before. They are going to be presented in Armenian, and they represent his work from 1934, when he published really his very first short story, all the way to the late 1970s, right before he died. Saroyan's papers are at Stanford University, and I have myself been going to Stanford now for about 2 years, reading through all of the unpublished and published works to try to find these stories that are going to be in this book. And as a part of that project, I have read hundreds, if not thousands, of pages of Saroyan's own journals. He kept a very careful, detailed journal, sometimes 2 on the same day of every single day of his life. And I will tell you that I've gotten to know Saroyan in a way that I had never known him before. And the Saroyan that I've come to know, I will tell you, number one, I love very much. Number two, he is not a perfect man. He had very difficult periods of his life. He was a difficult man to be friends with for lots of people. I think that he had a life that had both the highest of the highest, the highest moments you can possibly have as an artist, and some of the lowest moments that one can think of as a human being, which in my mind makes him even more admirable. But he is, I think, perhaps different than the public persona that he communicated of himself throughout his life, a very happy-go-lucky and always optimistic. He wasn't always optimistic. He was like all of us. He had his strengths and his weaknesses. But I will tell you that maybe my father's best day. My family was in the wine business. We had a winery near Fresno, and we had an office in San Francisco. And one day, completely unexpectedly, the door to the office flew open, and a man's loud voice said, "Where is Robert Setrakian? I am Saroyan." And in he came, and they had 2 bottles of champagne together and told stories and jokes with one another for hours. And it is the best memory my father has of William Saroyan in their days together. That was a wonderful, wonderful day, and fully in keeping with a full manifestation and embodiment of Saroyan at his best. It was great.
Այ անդրադառնանք անտիպ
So as you have mentioned about the 22 stories that have never been published, and as you have mentioned, it includes early stage writings of Saroyan and up to the very last days. So we see there is a huge legacy there. How did you choose which one to include? Because you have mentioned you have read more than hundreds, or so have you decided on just the topics that were closely connected to Armenians, or they include also global topics? So how did you come to the final decision?
First of all, I did not choose a story specifically for Armenians. I hope that the work will be presented in English, in Armenian. I've got a publisher in France that may be interested. I see this as a global work. It is more representative. It is representative of Saroyan's work in all phases of his life. Now, many of the stories are about his Armenian ethnicity. Many of the stories are about the Armenian community in Fresno, which I think is pretty interesting and very accurate of the community that I knew growing up. They were, and I should add, there are a few more stories that the team at Antares and I also hope to publish in a separate book that are much longer. There are 4, the word is novellas, that we think can have a standalone offering. So after this book, I hope there are going to be more of unpublished work that we're going to be able to share. But these, candidly, were my 22 favorites. And they're pretty good, I think.
Վերադառնանք օրագրերին ու այն փաստին, որ դուք ձեզ
You
համար
have been speaking about how you discovered Saroyan for yourself and reading what he was writing in his notebooks, diaries, and as far as I remember, I have listened to one of the podcasts when he very sincerely was telling that, at some point after he reached the highest point, he was having breakdowns and also problems with alcohol and so on and so forth. And speaking, I would like here to compare Nabokov's case, because at some point Nabokov also started to write for money. Exactly, he knew, for example, this much words per count, and I will earn this much. But in both cases, and especially in Saroyan case, he didn't lose his talent. Well, he was writing exactly this number of amount of words for this amount of money. How didn't he lose the perfectionism, his talent? Still, it remains everywhere.
Yeah, it's incredible. So you can sort of think of his professional life as a published writer in 3 phases. His first work was in 1934, and from 1934 to about 1949, he was among the most successful writers in the world. Everything he wrote, the critics loved it. He had best-selling books of short stories, best-selling novels. He had hit plays. He had an Academy Award-winning movie. He had a best-selling song. He was making so much money, you can't believe it. And everything he wrote, everybody loved. And during that period, he also got married. He had children. And he was gambling huge amounts of money, but he was making so much money, it was okay. It wasn't a massive problem for his life. So that was the first part. The second part was the next 10 years, from about 1949 to 1958, when his writing became less popular. He remained very productive. He wrote a lot, but was not as successful. And yet he continued to gamble huge amounts of money, and he couldn't afford it. His marriage fell apart, his family fell apart, he was drinking a lot, as you said. He famously said, "I don't want you to think I lost every penny gambling. I also drank a lot of it away, and I bought an overcoat." So that was part 2. And then in about 1958, he made a very important decision, which was he was going to try to limit his gambling. And you had it exactly right. He continued to write and write and write and write. He wrote every single day. He wrote a lot, and he still had his talent. And from 1958 until when he died in 1981, he wrote a huge amount and was able to sell a lot of it. He still gambled a little bit, but not the huge sums that had been ruining his life. And he was able to reconstruct his finances. He was re-evaluated by the critics, and they came to realize once again, hey, this stuff is very, very good. And actually during that period had a number of stories that weren't published that are part of this book. It was a challenging period. It was not always, a complete victory for himself. There were difficult times, and I'll tell you about one of them in a minute. But that was the third chapter of his three-chapter professional life, and it was a chapter of redemption and sort of reconstruction and victory. So, an example, in 1965 was a hard, difficult year, and as I said, I've got his journals for every day. And I've taken some of the comments that he made about the stories he was writing or the work he was doing, and they're included in his book. And on November 30th, he said fundamentally, this has been a bad year. I want to make something of this year. I'm going to write one short story a day, starting today and ending January 1st. That's 33 days, and that's going to make something of the year. And the next 4 days, he wrote one story a day. And on the fifth day, he said, I don't want to do it anymore. But 3 of those 4 stories are great, and they're in the book. And I think that the people who read them are really going to like them a lot. They're terrific.
We see he had left really huge legacy, and the huge legacy he has left. And the previous questions that I asked, how he kept the talent, maybe here I see the answer of it, because he somehow wanted to overcome this gambling, these bad habits that he had, and this overcoming, through this process, he did it by writing. So can we say that writing was a means of overcoming hardships and keeping his style, bringing back his pen style, his talent?
Somewhat, yeah. I think that it was discipline. He wrote one day, and it was also his artwork. So he wrote one day, he was working on a novel. He was very happy with the way it was going. And he had finished the writing part of it. He usually wrote in the morning. And his journal, he said, this is lonely, productive work, and this is when I usually want to go berserk. I want to go boozing and gambling. Those are his words. He said, but I'm not going to. I'm going to, and then he wrote out the food he was going to make for himself. And he then sat down and made 3 pictures. And they're gorgeous. They're so great. And I think, number one, that part of Saroyan was this just urge to create in so many ways, and that energy had to be channeled somehow. Writing was one way, his painting was another, and I also think actually his journaling was another, gambling was another, and using it to I think your point is right, but it's even broader. It wasn't just writing, but it was figuring out ways that he could express himself, was what helped him contain those urges to be able to continue to be so productive and creative.
Նրա ամենահայտնի
While speaking about Saroyan, I couldn't help skipping human comedy because, well, back then he was speaking about words about lonely mother, and today, in 21st century, we witness these words, lonely mother. So how much it resembles with our nowadays? Can we think of it like what he did and what we witness today?
That's a good question. And you know that the human comedy was remade into a movie called Ithaca by Meg Ryan, and she really emphasized the single mother part of that. And Saroyan's dedication of the book that he made out of the human comedy was to his mom, and I've actually seen a number of different drafts of it before the one that was ultimately used in the book, and they were all about that, about wanting to live up to her greatness that he saw in her, and the love that she had brought to their family, and the work that she had done to keep that family alive after his dad died when he was very young. I think that even more broadly, if you don't mind, the challenges that Saroyan faced as an immigrant child, it's a lot like we all face in so many aspects of our lives. Nobody cared about him. Nobody, took care of him, and he needed to have his own resilience and faith in his own capabilities, defiance, to direct himself. And he also needed optimism and love to be able to come through it in a way that didn't destroy him, but actually, sort of engaged with others. And from that perspective, I think that his philosophy is very relevant today, globally, and especially to young people.
Սարյանի փիլիսոփայության անկյունակարերից է նեվազատությունը։
So, as we have come to this part, the pillars of Saroyan's philosophy was freedom, finding freedom. Maybe it was one of the reasons why he was gambling and trying to break the rules. And nowadays, in a century where we think that we have reached this absolute freedom, we see that it is not so. And for example, with the example of Coldplay couples that were seen during their concert and so on and so forth, like we are all controlled by unseen forces. So how to bring this free soul to our life, because life is not free anymore.
I wish I knew. I wish I could give you a good answer.
Շատ կուզեի ձեզ լավ պատասխան տամ։
Yeah, it's so true.
Maybe you will try to answer like Saroyan would do it.
Saroyan, I'll tell you, Saroyan would say it is so hilarious. It's the funniest thing he's ever seen. The funniest damn thing he's ever seen. Emphasis on the damn.
Վերադառնանք
Coming back to your visit, as we have come, that it is your third visit. So, how you feel yourself in Armenia? How the Armenian sounds to you?
Oh, let me say, first of all, I love it here. It's wonderful. It's wonderful being here with my wife, her first trip, and she's having a great time too, and helping me open my eyes to a number of aspects of Armenia. It is fantastic, and the Armenian people are so wonderful. It's been great. It's been great. And you know, when Saroyan made his first money in 1934, the first thing he did was travel, and the first place he came was Armenia. And he came back and he said, one thing I've learned from this trip is that people are people everywhere, you know, and that this is confirmation, not revelation for me here, that people in Armenia are just great people like they are every place else, and in many ways they're more alike than they are different. But this is a wonderful place to visit, and I can see why Armenians love it so much.
Քանի որ նշեցիք կանոջ
As
մասին,
you have mentioned that you are here with your wife, I'm happy to hear that. But speaking about Saroyan, he was divorced. Then what he did, he got married to the same woman. So it's rather interesting to me, because we all know when a man gets divorced, they gain this freedom. They don't want to be back, especially to the same woman. They try to find something young, someone younger, someone else, or to keep this freedom through their life. So what was the reason? How did it happen? Saroyan got married the second time to the same woman.
Yeah. He wrote a lot in his journals about that. And they're very difficult. It's a difficult question to answer in a short amount of time. But I think that this was a relationship where they both loved each other very intensely and were also incompatible. And when they were apart, that love brought them back together again. And once they got back together again, the incompatibility once again blew the relationship apart. That is as true a way I can explain that without going into the details, which basically tend to confirm what I just said. And interestingly, she wrote a book too. She wrote a book called In with the Porcupines or something like that. She was married afterwards to Walter Matthau, the actor, but said that one of the most important, most influential voices on their reconciliation was Charlie Chaplin, with whom she was very close friends with Charlie's wife, and the four of them were close friends together. And Charlie, encouraged her to overlook William Saroyan's personality flaws, because what was also embodied there was this incredible artistic talent and incredible artistic soul. And I think that was part of the attraction. And the personality incompatibilities were they were not able to resolve those in their second marriage, or their first marriage, actually. And I will also say, to fully answer one part of your question, there were plenty of other women that came along after they separated the second time for the rest of his life. He just didn't marry any of them.
Saroyan didn't marry
He
them.
didn't marry any of them, no.
Շնորհակալություն։
Thank you for being here. Also, thank you for giving us deep insights of Saroyan. And also, I truly envy you because you have this chance to work there. And let me tell you that by getting this legacy, you have become the second guardian angel for his Saroyan's legacy. Thank you.
Oh, I really appreciate being here. I've loved our conversation. I've loved the questions that you've asked, and thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
Զրուցեցինք Սարոյան հիմնադրամի նախագահ Setrakiani հետ։ Նշեմ, որ այսօրվանից մեկնարկել է եւ այս ողջ շաբաթ մինչեւ սեպտեմբերի 11-ը Սարոյանական շաբաթ է լինելու, տարբեր միջոցառումներ են լինելու, ներկայացումներ, գրքի շնորհանդես, ընթերցումներ, անպայման հետևեք, ակտիվ եղեք եւ մասնակցեք այդ Սարոյանական ոգու ու հոգու այդ երևանյան օրերին։ Եթերում Պոդքասթներ, չմոռանաք բաժանորդագրվել, դա իսկապես չափազանց կարևոր է մեզ համար։